Alright, today we're going to do the 2.6 homework, part 2, video 1. We're going to start at 20, and we're going to go by all the evens, and we'll see how far we get. I'll get as many as I get done in this video, and then we'll move on. Big key for this section is we're going to be using the steps for finding zeros, and nothing's going to be given. So it's not going to say given a factor, or something is a factor, or something is a zero. So because of that, you have to use these steps. Step 1, you're going to find your P and your Q. You're going to write out all the factors of P and Q. And then you're going to write all the P's over all the Q's. That's going to give you a big list. So that's going to be a big list of stuff. Then you're going to guess a P of Q. So from their big list, you're going to guess, and you're going to divide until there is no remainder. That's going to be your answer, right? Whatever your P of Q was, that worked. Now then you have a couple options. In step 3, you can repeat step 2 with your new quotient, so pretend it's a brand new problem. Or if you're able to factor it, you can just factor it and solve. And then sometimes you could use the quadratic formula, so that's an option too. Okay? And we're going to start with 20 and move on. Alright, 20. We're going to start off. We're going to find our P. This is our P, and then we're going to find our Q. So 15 is P, Q is 4. How do you get 15? 1 and 15, 3 and 5. How do you get 4? 1 and 4, 2 and 2. Now, I'm going to do my P's over my Q's. So I'm going to put plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 15. That's one set. Those are all over 1. That's why I just leave it just exactly the same. Then I'm going to pick 2. Now I don't have to do 2 twice because the repeats aren't necessary. So I do plus or minus 1 half, plus or minus 3 halves, plus or minus 5 halves, plus or minus 15 halves. All right, 2 is taken care of. Now I'm going to do 4. Plus or minus 1/4, plus or minus 3/4, plus or minus 5/4, plus or minus 15/4. So these are my options. Now normally I just guess, but since there's a graph, I'm going to look for the x-intercepts. And I look at my graph, when I see my x-intercepts, I believe our x is -1. X is, I think it's going to be 3 halves, or 1 and a half, 1.5. And I think x is going to be 5 halves. I'm estimating those fractions. I think they're 1 and a half. I think they're 2 and a half. So I have to estimate. The only way to prove this is by using synthetic division. So I start my synthetic division, I make my box, and I put these numbers inside the box. So I have 4, -12, -1, and 15. Now outside the box, I'm going to put -1 because that's my first guess. This tells me to put -1. Drop down the 4. 4 times -1 is -4. -16. -16 times -1 is +16. Gives me a +15. Gives me a -15. Remember, outside you multiply, inside you add. You always drop that 4 down first. And this works. There is no remainder. That means x equals -1 is in fact an answer. So that works. It means this is true. Now you have a couple options here. I'm going to take this quotient and I'm going to write it as 4x squared minus 16x plus 15. I could try and factor it into 4x and x, 2x and 2x, and then factor 15, 1 and 15, 3 and 5, and do my sets of parentheses and see which one's going to work, and then set them equal to 0 and solve. Normally I would do that, but since I have these options here, in here, I'm going to go right into synthetic division. So I'm going to make another box. I'm going to put this inside the box. So I have 4, negative 16, and 15. This time I'm going to put 3 halves outside the box. If 3 halves works, then it is a factor, and I guessed right on my x-intercept. So I drop down the 4. 4 times 3 is 12. Half of that is 6, so I put a 6 here. If you want to use your calculator, you could just do 3ABC2 times 4. It'll give you 6. I end up with negative 10. Negative 10 times 3 is negative 30. I cut it in half. That gives me negative 15. No remainder. That means 3 halves works. So now I have a couple options. Option 1 is I could take 4 and negative 10 and write it as an expression, and I can make that 4x minus 10 because this was 4x squared minus 16x plus 15, and division makes it smaller. Then I could set it equal to 0, I can add 10, I could solve. Another easier way to do it is I could take 4, 10, and I could put that on top. And now I'm going to guess 5 halves. Drop down the 4. 4 times 5 is 20. Half of that is 10. See how there's no remainder? That means this is true too. So I just proved that x is equal to 3 halves is a 0. X is equal to 5 halves is a 0. So I got 3 different options. I proved them all. That's it. All right, 22, I'm going to find P and Q. So that's my P, that's my Q. 16, how do I get 16? Well, 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. How do I get 3? 1 and 3. So my P's over my Q's are going to be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8, plus or minus 16. Notice I don't put 4 in there twice. I don't need the repeats. Now I'm going to put them all over 3. So I do everything again. Plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8, plus or minus 16. This time I put it all over 3. Now, normally, that's when I would start guessing. I would make my box and start guessing. But once again, because of the graph, I'm going to use the graph given. I'm going to use the given graph. X-intercepts are x is equal to, I think it's going to be, the easy ones are 4 and 2. And my guess for this one is a number less than 1, because I know that it's not 1, but it's really close to 1. So the closest number to 1 that's less than it is 2/3. So I'm guessing 2/3. So now I'm going to just start using my synthetic division. I put these numbers inside, so I have negative 3. A lot of people forgot the negative 3, and they messed up all their division. So you need that negative 3 up front. I'm going to put 4 on the outside. Drop down the 4. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Gives me positive 8. Gives me 32, which gives me negative 4. 4 negative 4 is negative 16. It works. So x is equal to 4 is a solution. I just proved it. Now, this is negative 3x squared plus 8x minus 4. I could find a new p and a new q, but or I could even factor it. I could factor it and make my sets of parentheses and solve those, but I'm just going to put negative 3, 8, and negative 4. And I don't have to find a new p and q because I know to try 2 next. Drop down 2. Or put 2 here. Drop down the negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Drop down the 2. Say a positive 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So 2 works. It means I have x is equal to 2 as an answer. Now I have a couple options here. I could make this minus 3x plus 2. I could set it equal to 0. Or I'm just going to do synthetic division again because it's really short now, because I'm going to put minus 3 and 2. I'm going to put 2/3 on the outside. Drop down to negative 3. Negative 3 times 2/3 is negative 2. No remainder, which means that works too. So these all are valid answers. And that's it. 22 is done. 24, we have f of x equals 2x cubed plus 2x squared minus 8x minus 8. So I'm going to go through everything again. I'm going to find my p. I'm going to find my q. How do I get p? 1 and 8, 2 and 4. How do I get q? 1 and 2. So my p over my q's are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 8. And then I put them all over 2. So I have plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 2/2, plus or minus 4/2, plus or minus 8/2. Now remember, if a fraction can be simplified, it should be a repeat. So 2 over 2 is the same thing as 1, so I don't need that. 4 over 2 is the same thing as 2, so I don't need that. 8 over 2 is the same thing as 4. So I just have 5 different options, times 2 is 10 different choices. So I'm just going to start picking. My rule is always to pick 1 first, then switch to negative 1. So I pick 1. I put 2, 2, negative 8, negative 8 in the box. We're going to try 1. 2 times 1 is 2. So I have a 2 here. 2 plus 2 is 4. 1 times 4, I get negative 4. 1 and negative 4 is negative 4. That's not going to work. So positive 1 didn't work. Negative 1 did not work. So that means I'm going to try our positive 1. Positive 1 did not work. So I'm going to try negative 1. So I'm going to do everything exactly the same. This time I'm just trying negative 1. I get negative 1. 2 gets dropped down. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. 2 and negative 2 is 0. Negative 1 times 0 is 0. I get negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 1 is positive 8. And I get no remainder. That means it works. So x is equal to negative 1 is an answer. Now this becomes, because we're dividing, that was 3, so this is 2x squared. There is no x term, so I could put plus 0x, but I'm not even going to write that. Minus 8. Now, I could do synthetic division all over again. I could find a new p, find a new q, and keep on using synthetic division. That's an option if you're stuck. But I'm just going to set this equal to 0. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. I get 2x squared equals 8. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. X squared is equal to 4. I square root both sides. I get x is equal to plus or minus 2. So that means my final answers are x is equal to 2 and x is equal to negative 2. 3 solutions. I know there can't be any more solutions because that little 3 tells me that. All right, tells you that you could have up to 3 solutions. All right, moving on to 26. All right, 26 is 2x cubed minus 3x squared minus 14x plus 15. There's my p. There's my q. Well, how do I get 15? 1 and 15. 3 and 5. How do I get 2? 1 and 2. So my p over my q's are going to be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 15. They're also going to be all over 2. So I have plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 3/2, plus or minus 5/2, plus or minus 15/2. Now, I'm going to make my box. I'm going to put 2, negative 3, negative 14, and 15 in the box. I'm going to guess, and remember I get that from this part right here. I'm guessing 1. I don't know if 1's going to work. Let's find out. Drop down the 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Get a negative 1. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Gives me negative 15. 1 and negative 15 is negative 15. So I have no remainder. 1 works. That means x is equal to 1 is a solution. Now, I could start all over and keep on guessing numbers. That's an option. You could make another box, you could make a new box, and put 2, -1, and -15 in the box, and then guess. But I'm going to write this as 2x squared minus x minus 15. I'm going to set it equal to 0. And that means I'm going to factor it. 2x and x. And how do I get 15? It could be -3 and 5, -1 and 15. So I'm going to say, my guess is going to be 2x plus 5, x minus 3. I'm going to set it equal to 0. Let's see. The outside is minus 6x. The inside is 5x. Together, that's 1x, which is what I have here, which is -1x, which is actually what I have here. So this works. So I get to say 2x plus 5 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0. So x is equal to 3, that's one solution. And then I subtract 5. And then I divide by 2. So my other solution is x is equal to -5 over 2. 1, 2, 3 solutions. All right. Like I said, you could have kept on guessing and tried all these, and using synthetic division, you would have gotten all the answers. Okay? That's it for 26. Alrighty. 28. Find my P. Find my Q. How do I get 3? 1 and 3. How do I get 12? 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So I do all my P's over my Q's. So I say plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 12. I do all those over 3. Plus or minus 1/3, plus or minus 2/3, plus or minus 3/3 is just 1, so I don't need it. Plus or minus 4/3, plus or minus 6/3, well that's 2, so I don't need that. And plus or minus 12/3 is 4, so I don't need that either. Alright, so these are my options. Now I'm going to start guessing. I fill out my inside from there. 3, 19, 4, -12. Then I'm going to guess 1 first. I don't know if that's going to work. We'll see. 3, 1 times 3 is 3. I get 22. 1 times 22 is 22. I get 26. It's not going to work. So 21 does not work. So now I'm going to make that negative. 3 times -1 is -3. I get 16. -16 gives me -12. Negative and negative is +12. -1 works. So I know I have x equal to -1 as a solution. So now I have 3x squared plus 16x minus 12. Well, I could have 3x and x. I could have -1 and 12, -2 and 6, -3 and 4. So I make my parentheses, 3x and x. I'm going to try -3 and 4. Gives me 12x. Gives me -3x. Together that's 9x. It's not what I want here. So that's not going to help me. So -3 and 4 is not going to work, but maybe the order needs to be changed. It's possible. So I put the +4 here, and the -3 here. Let's try again. I get -9x. The inside I get 4x. Together that's -5x. It's not what I have here. So 3 and 4 is not going to work. That means I'm going to try -2 and 6. So I put -2 and 6, because negative 3 and negative 4 didn't work. 3 times 6 is 18x. Negative 2 is negative 2x. Together, that is 16x, which is what I want. So that works. So that means I have 3x minus 2 equals 0. I get 3x is equal to 2. X is equal to 2/3 when I solve it. There's one answer. X plus 6 equals 0. X is equal to negative 6. So those are my three answers. X is equal to negative 1. X is equal to negative 6. X is equal to 2/3. I know there's no other options because of the little 3. All right, and that's it for 28. All right, 30. 30 is very similar to number 16 and number 18 from the last part, where because it's to the 4th power, I know I'm more than likely going to have to do my synthetic division twice. So I'm going to divide 2 times. And I don't mean like 2x, I mean divide twice. So I still do everything the same. I find my p. That is 4. My q is 2. Well, how do I get 4? 1 and 4. 2 and 2. How do I get 2? 1 and 2. So I do my p's over my q's. So I have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. And then I have plus or minus 1/2, plus or minus 2 over 2, which is 1, so I don't need that. Plus or minus 4 over 2, which is 2, so I don't need that. Now I'm going to make my box. I'm going to put these numbers on the inside, 2, 9, 5, 3, and negative 4, and I'm going to guess 1. So I put 1 on the box. I drop it down, 2. 2 times 1 is 2. 9 and 2 is 11. 11 gives me 16 here. 1 is 16. I get 19. That's not going to give me positive 4, so I know 1's not going to work. So now I'm going to try negative 1. Drop down the 2. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. I get 7. Negative 7. I get negative 2. Positive 2. 5. Negative 5. No remainder. So 1's not going to work. Negative 1's not going to work. Just keeping a list of the things I've tried as I go. So negative 1 and 1 didn't work. So now I'm going to try 2 on the outside. I'm going to drop down the 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 9 to 4 is 13. 2 times 13 is 26. 31. 62. 65. 65 is definitely not going to give me, times 2 is not going to give me negative 4. So 2 doesn't work. So I'm going to make it negative. Right here is the list of stuff that's not working. This list is list of stuff not working. So now I drop down the 2. That gives me negative 4, gives me a positive 5, gives me a negative 10, gives me a negative 5, gives me a positive 10, 13. That's negative 26. Not going to give me 0. So that's not going to work. So now I'm going to try the next number. I tried negative 2. Now I already tried 1 and 2. Now I'm going to try 4. So I do everything again. Drop down the 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 9 and 8 is 17. 4 times 17 is 68. It gives me 73. 4 times 73, 292. Gives me 295. Definitely not going to give me 4. So 4 is not going to work. It means none of these are going to work. So I'm going to say there are no solutions. I had a remainder for all options. And that's it. Alright, got lucky there. Well, I mean, not necessarily lucky because we had to go through all the division, but there are no more answers. There's no factoring to do. Okay, that's it. Alright, 32, once again, is very similar to number 16 and 18. It'll be the last one for this assignment. That's going to be P is 12, Q is 3. How do I get 12? 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. How do I get 3? 1 and 3. So my P's over my Q's are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 12, and then all those all over 3. So I have plus or minus 1/3, plus or minus 2/3, plus or minus 3/3 is the same thing as 1, so I don't need it. Plus or minus 4/3, plus or minus 6/3 is the same thing as 2, so I don't need that. Plus or minus 12/3 is the same thing as 4. Don't need that. Now I'm going to go into my guessing. Alright, so I tried 1. I just, in order to save time, we're almost at the end of the video, I just did that all ahead of time. And notice I got a remainder, so 1's not going to work. So now I'm going to try -1. Notice when I try -1, I got a remainder of -68. So 1's not going to help me. Alright, I'm going to try 2 next, and just in the essence of time, I'm going to just do that really quickly. Alright, try 2. 2 did not work. Notice I got a remainder of -70. So now I'm going to go and try -2. So I'm going to make that -2, and I'm going to try that again. And in the essence of time, I'm just going to do that really quickly. Alright, I tried -2. That didn't work because I got a remainder of -114. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to put 3 outside the box and see if that works. Now I tried 3. Didn't work. I got a remainder of -96. So that means I'm going to try -3 next and see what happens. Alrighty, so I tried -3 and I finally got something that worked. So that was my first guess, is -3. So I know one of my answers is x is equal to -3. Now the thing is, we started with something to the 4th power. So this isn't an x squared answer. It's 3x cubed minus 15x squared plus 13x minus 4. Which means I basically have to start all over with new problem. So on the next page, I'm going to pretend like this is a brand new problem, and that's my answer. That's my question. So now I have a new P, and I have a new Q. How do I get 4? 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. How do I get 3? 1 and 3. So I have my P over my Q, or my new P's over my new Q's. It's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4, and then all of them all over 3. 1/3 plus or minus 2/3 plus or minus 4/3. And the good news is I already checked 1 and 2 in the last problem, so I don't have to check them again in this problem. So I'm going to start with 4. Make my box. I put 3, -15, 13, and -4. This time I'm putting 4 on the outside. I drop it down. 4 times 3 is 12. I get -3. -12. I get a +1. +4. That means I have no remainder. So that means I have x is equal to 4 as an answer. And from the last page, I have x equal to -3. So I have x is equal to... Now my new answer is 3x squared minus 3x plus 1. It is not factorable. So I have to use the quadratic formula. So I said the opposite of -3 plus or minus 3 squared, -3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times 3. That is negative, which means an I will show up, so no help. These are my only 2 answers, right there.